I dedicate this video to Jonathan Larson. His legacy lives on. Welcome back to December's musical of the month, which means we are at the last musical of the month of 2016. The time went so fast. This month, I think you guys are going to be really excited because you have been requesting this musical since the beginning of time. The dinosaurs were walking and they were like, hey, Jona, you should do Rent. So here I am, ready to talk about Rent. Personally, I love this musical. I was obsessed with it in high school, like hardcore. So I'm more than happy to talk to you about it and give you some information you might not know. Of course, the book, music, and lyrics were all done by Jonathan Larson. He actually worked on this for 7 years, and he never really got to see the impact it made, which is so tragic and awful, and I'll get to that a little bit later. Rent actually began as a collaboration between Jonathan Larson and a man named Billy Aronson. Billy actually saw an opera called La Boheme, and he realized how similar it was to the current day. So the idea came about to update the opera and make it take place in 80s New York. At the center, the musical is very similar to the opera with minor changes like tuberculosis becoming AIDS. But basically, they just made it more modern. Billy actually wrote 3 songs, 2 of which are pretty similar to this day. Those are Santa Fe and I Should Tell You. But collaborating wasn't really going as well as the 2 men wanted it to. From what I gather, it was just a communication thing. The communication was just a little bit off. So both Billy and Jonathan went on to do other projects. But after a while, Jonathan decided to come back to Rent. He got permission from Billy to continue working on the project. One big reason why Jonathan decided to come back was because AIDS had begun affecting his personal life. He was actually inspired by Friends Indeed. He attended this support group with his very close friend, and they emphasized that fear wasn't the only option and that you had to just live life with love. Those messages are definitely at the core of Rent. Something Jonathan really wanted to do was celebrate art and the people that create it. And he had an idea to integrate some rock music into musical theater. A lot of the content in Rent is inspired by stuff that was actually going on in his life. In fact, Jonathan's friend, Jonathan Burkhart, said that there's a little bit of John all over the musical. Rent is very much a celebration of life. Spoiler alert, a lot of people wonder why Mimi doesn't die at the end. Jonathan's simple explanation is that it's a play about life, not a play about death. I think that's so important to remember. It's not about death, it's not about disease, it's about living and thriving. One day in 1992, Jonathan was just riding his bike and he found a theater. This is when things really started to move. On June 7th, 1993, it was time to find some investors, so there was a staged reading. But a lot of people that were there felt that the songs were really strong, but the story really needed some help. 1 year later, Jonathan received a very, very prestigious grant. He got $45,000, the 45K Richard Rodgers grant. This money was used to get a workshop together. That was during spring, and the workshop was scheduled for fall. But the script still needed work, especially the relationship between Maureen and Joanne. At that point, Maureen was just really mean and awful, and Joanne wasn't strong enough. And originally, just like in the opera, Maureen was going to return to Mark at the end of the show. That is just, I'm so glad that's not what happened. Something Jonathan really had to do was branch out from the opera and branch out from his personal experiences and really focus on making the story the best it could be. In September 1994, casting for the workshop began. They strived for authenticity with the characters and the story in their casting, which I think they achieved. Obviously, I didn't see the workshop, but the cast that they ended up with for the Broadway run is just so good. A musical director named Tim Wheel was brought on. His job was basically to blend the then computerized music into the rock sound that we know with some musical theater undertones. October 9th through November 6th, 1994, a workshop finally began, and it was sold out by the end. But between 1994 and 1995, 7 songs were added to the show. Another big change was actually for the song Rent. They made it a lot less dark and made it more of a powerful introduction. Basically, the show was changing in every way possible. Auditions for the full production began. Like I said before, they were striving for authenticity and a raw sound. So some people that were casted had theater experience and some didn't. For example, Idina Menzel and Adam Pascal were not actors. They were rock singers, which is crazy to think about because we know them so well in the theater community now. Wilson Jermaine Heredia was actually working as an emergency dispatcher, and he wasn't sure if he was going to continue in theater, so thank goodness they casted him because I can't imagine Angel being played by anybody else. Jonathan really wanted the cast to be a close community, and everyone involved, the cast, the crew, everybody cultivated that relationship. Jonathan was typically very quiet during rehearsals, and a lot of the cast members didn't really know him. But he was still such a powerful force. In December 1995, Jonathan was still revising and rewriting. The very last element added to the script was actually Take Me or Leave Me. And sadly, that was probably the last song that Jonathan ever wrote. January 21st of 1996 marked the Tech Week. Now at this time, Jonathan was in and out of the hospital, but he was just diagnosed with a bad flu. On January 25th, 1996, there was the first off-Broadway preview of the show. The night before, so January 24th, 1996, the show had its final dress rehearsal and it got a standing ovation. Sadly, that very same night, Jonathan Larson passed away. It was very sudden. He was only 35 years old. Honestly, it's just really, really tragic. So the preview was canceled. Instead, they did a sing-through for Jonathan's friends and family. And at Jonathan's memorial on February 3rd, the cast sang, "I'll Cover You." It's so sad to me that Jonathan never got to see the impact that his show had. I'm so glad he got to see the standing ovation of the final dress rehearsal. It's just, I don't know. After this, previews continued and the audience was just going wild. Following the previews, the very first month of off-Broadway performances were sold out in the first day. Some people were a little bit apprehensive about the show moving to Broadway because they felt like it was a little bit against the show's spirit. But on February 23rd, it was announced that the show would be moving to Broadway. It was done at the Nederlander Theater because that theater has a little bit of grit to it. And at this point, the entire show was reblocked. The cast was rehearsing every single day, sometimes just repeating a tiny few minutes of the show to get it just right. During all this, the actors and the show itself were being critically acclaimed. The actors suddenly found themselves soaring into the media on magazines and newspapers. And Jonathan Larson won the Pulitzer Prize for drama during this time, which is so special. I wish you could have been there to hear that. On April 29th, 1996, Rent opened on Broadway. Of course, the show was dedicated to Jonathan Larson, and before the cast got to their places, there was applause for an entire 3 minutes. Very similar to Hamilton today, the show was a mega hit. There were TV spots, magazine spreads, articles, and the show was selling out months in advance. The fans of the show were named Rent Heads, and they camped out outside the theater to try to get tickets. Due to the enormous success, they were given the biggest budget in Broadway history to do a cast recording. Who out there has the cast recording? I do, and I love it. Rent invaded the Tonys with 10 nominations and 4 wins. They won Best Musical, Best Book of a Musical, Best Original Score, and Best Performance by a Featured Actor in a Musical, Wilson. In addition, they won 6 Drama Desk Awards. Outstanding Musical, Outstanding Book of a Musical, Outstanding Featured Actor in a Musical, Wilson, Outstanding Orchestrations, Outstanding Music, and Outstanding Lyrics. They also won 3 Obies, the New York Drama Critics Award for Best Musical, an let's try that again. An Outer Critics Circle Award, and a Drama League Award. Basically, there were a lot of awards. Something that was an award in itself was that Rent brought a lot of young people to the theater, which Jonathan would have loved to see. Rent is still super, super popular in the theater community and outside of it today. It's definitely known for reinventing what we thought of theater, and it inspired so many young people to integrate their music and their sound into musicals. Without Rent, we may never have seen Hamilton. In fact, we probably most definitely would never have seen Hamilton, or In the Heights, or Next to Normal, or Spring Awakening. It's crazy. Rent was just, it was so important and still is to this day. This video could be a half-hour long. There's so much to say about Rent. There have been other really big productions and a movie version. Oh, there's just so much to say. I decided to just stick to the musical, but I am open to discuss it more with you guys. The cast, the music, the story, everything about it is just so brilliant and so special. Let me know in the comments if you have seen Rent or been in Rent, or what your favorite song is, or if you've seen the movie version, just anything you want. And I will see you with the next musical next month. But in the meantime, I will be uploading Wednesdays and Fridays like always. I love you all, stay beautifully people, and have a happy holidays. Bye! Bye 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 bye.